Welcome to the very first project. In this project, we're going to create a simple signature application, which is going to record your name and the date, or the date and your name, depending on in which order you're writing them in. Now, in this project, we're going to use state, which is a React hook. We're also going to create our first component. We're going to do some inline styles, and well, that's basically it. We're also going to check out how we can create styles using variables and how we can use functions in JSX. So, hope you're excited. Let me also show you how the project works. It's a pretty simple project, but that's also the idea here. We're going to start simple, and again, we're going to go into more complex projects. So let's choose a date from down here. Say today, 19th of November, and we can type in here name. Let's see, Norbert, and hit enter, and there we go. There's a name. If you want to change something here, you can type in Laura. It's going to change it up. Okay, this is also capital letters. We could also change it up to lowercase, or the first letters to be uppercase and then everything else to be lowercase. And there's your date right here. So simple application, but a lot to learn. Let's get started with this project. Okay, so let's get started with the project. For this, we're going to go into projects, and within here, we're going to create a new folder. And please consider keeping my naming convention. So 01-e-signature and -app. Okay, within here, let's create a file. And let's call it e-signature, and we're going to call it, we're going to use now capital letters, so signature and app.js and x. Okay, I'm going to use here a self-exporting function RFC. I'm going to use the export up here, export default function and signature function. So we're not going to use class-based components, we're going to use function-based components. Let me delete this here. We're actually going to export here a div with a class of container, so class name container, and I'm going to also use text center as style. Let's go right in here. I'm going to create our very first component. So let's create a folder outside of the projects. Well, you know what? Let's create it in the project. So projects, new folder, and we're going to call this components, and all of our components will live in here. And I'm missing here an N. Components. There we go. So let's create the very first component. We have to create here a title component. Title.jsx, RFCE, or just RFC. RFC, and there we go. So the title component. The title component will consist of an h1. Let's replace this div with an h1. Let's give it the class name of title, and let's also add here text center. Let's hit enter. Let's import this component so we can already see what is happening here. So importing the component, and let me first of all hit save. Let's import the component here. Also, if you just type in title, the component, because it's already in here, should be recognized. If you have all of your snippets, close it up, hit save, and you should see the title component right here. There's nothing in here yet, just the title. And we also didn't import our project into our application. So app, there's our app. Instead of this project, we're going to import our very first project. So our first project is the e-signature application. You can already see it's recognized here, and it's also imported and automatically up there. Just close it up, and now you should see title, because this is what we have in here in the component and also in our application. So remember, the strategy here is not to install React 1000 million times, but each and every application that we're going to create is going to be imported here, and this is going to be the application. So the next application, just going to comment this out, and then I'm going to comment in the next application, or import in the next application. Okay, let's move back to our signature application. We got here our title, the component. We imported it up here from components. Now we're going to go back to component, because this is not done. We still need to add a couple of things. Let's say the title will not be title, but it's going to be something else. So the idea here is that I'm going to create a condition. So if there is a title passed in here, a variable, let's just say if there is no text passed in here, then use the text of title. If there is something passed in here, then use that text. And we're going to pass this in as a prop up here as text. Okay, so if we pass in something into our title, for example, in our case is going to be text, and this will be name, then instead of title, we're going to have name. You can already see this appearing here. But if we wouldn't have anything in there, then it's going to be title. We're not done with the title component. I also want to add here a couple of conditions for the class, or actually just one condition. So instead of having this in here, let's wrap this into curly brackets. And let's say if there is a class passed in here, or there are multiple classes, or if there are no classes passed in here, classes, then just display the title, text center, and so forth and so on. But if there is something passed in here, then we are going to use those classes. So classes, and what am I doing wrong here? I have too much S's here. And also let's pass it up here. You can pass it before the title even, or before the text. So classes and comma, and there we go. So if I would pass in here class, let's say I'm going to change this. Let's use the classes prop. And let's say I'm going to choose here to pass in instead of a title, let's say this is going to be a subtitle. So subtitle, which is basically a class that I do have in our CSS. Let's see, you can search here, dot subtitle, and there we go. It's going to have a font size of 2.5 RAM, font weight of 400, so far and so on. But the title is much larger, should be up here, 3.75. Okay, so if you're passing in some kind of class, there is anything else, then the title, then that will be that will replace the title class. Okay, so we have our title, and actually I'm going to copy this one more time because the second one was going to be date. We're going to have a name and a date, exactly as we have here. You could also change this or leave it as main title, and this will be bolded out, but you know what? I'm going to change this down here to main title, and I'm going to leave this as title. So like that. Okay, next I'm going to pass a paragraph tag under this title, paragraph, and you can add here lorem, let's say lorem 300. That's too much. Let's just leave a lorem ifs as it is. And let's pass in here a margin bottom of 4. It's going to give us a bit more space here. And now for the text, so for the date, we have here date and a signature status. Both of them are input tags. Let's pass them in here. Okay, so input. And the type of the input is going to be date, the very first one, because we're going to pass in number or a date here. And then we're going to have a value. Now the value that we're going to pass in here, I'm just going to leave it as an empty string for now. And I'm going to copy this. Now, you know what? Let me add a style to this. So there are two ways of adding styles. As you know, in CSS, we can add here our own style, type something in, or we could use a variable. Now, this is what I'm actually going to do here. Above the return, I'm going to create a const. And let's say this is going to be input style. Now I'm going to assign this to an object. I'm going to use border, and let's set this to none. And I'm going to start passing this automatically in here. So instead of two curly brackets, I'm going to pass in the variable, which is going to take out the borders from this. Now you know what? I'm going to copy this one more time, change this to text. We're going to also have our signature on the right side. Let's go back up to our input style, and after border, I'm going to pass in a couple of things. Let's say a border to the bottom now, border. And remember, when you're typing in styles, exactly as in inline styles in React, you need to use camel case. So border and camel case, so not dash, but border, camel case, bottom. And I'm going to give this a border to the bottom. And now you need to add between quotation mark 2 pixels and dotted. And there we go. Okay, next up, let's also take out the outline. So when I'm focusing in here, don't want to have that outline. So outline column and string of none, close it with a comma, and the last thing I want to add to this is a padding. I'm going to add a padding of 0.35 RAM, and this is going to be top and bottom, and we're going to add 0 to left and right. Okay, now one last thing, if you want to change the background color, for example, of the entire document, you can select from here the document, and it's going to be automatically styled then. Document body dot style, and let's go with the background. And I'm going to change the background to, let's say, hash EEE. It's going to be a grayed out background. Okay, you can see how easy we just styled the background color by grabbing onto the DOM element. It's not the shadow DOM, but the DOM element. So these two input tags, they should be way down here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap them into a footer tag. You can also use just a regular div, but because they're all almost in a footer, I'm going to use a footer tag. So I'm going to select these two fellows, so you and you, hold down shift, select them both, hold down option or alt on a PC, and arrow up. They should be moved up now. Okay, I'm going to use here a couple of classes now. So class name dflex, this is going to display it as flex. And now let's just use an inline style. So style, and let's pass in here so you can also see some inline styles. Let's pass in here a justify and content. And we're going to justify the content here with space around the elements. Now let's also display them relative. So position, comma, position, dash string of relative. And now we can position them somewhere. I'm going to position them from the top with, let's say, 60 viewport heights. Okay, and they're going to be pushed down. You know, that's too much. 40 viewport heights. That's much better. Okay, so right now, if I would type something in our input tag, you will see it's not working because I add a empty value to it. Also, the date will not work because I just added empty values to it. If I would delete, let's delete it from the text, the empty value, hit save, try to type something in here, then it's going to work. But why am I adding here a value? Because I want to use this value. So let's hit save again and put our value back. And now it's time to use state. Okay, now in order to use state, we need to import it up here from React. So let's go up here. You can also do React, comma, use state. And there we go. We just imported use state. Now in order to use state, you need to go down here, assign it to a variable. So let's use const. Then we're going to destructure here two values, actually one value and one function that is going to set that value. Let's first of all take care of the naming part. So name, and we're going to use a function which is going to set the name. So set name, and we're going to assign this to use state. Okay, and we can also assign state or leave this empty, which basically means nothing. We can also assign an empty string. Now we're going to use this state in our values. And instead of this empty string, we're going to add in here the state of name. Now, if you start typing in something in here, nothing happens because when you're trying to type something into an input tag, you're trying to change something. This means that you need to have a change event listener. So let's just use here on change. And when we are changing something in this input tag, then something should happen. And this something should be handled by a function. And usually we call these functions handlers. So let's call this handle name change. Okay, now we need to create this function because the function is not in here. Just going to use the function in here. It's always screaming at me, hey, where's my function? Well, your function will be up here. And I'm also going to use here const, the name of the function, and then I'm going to assign it to a error function. Now I'm also going to pass in here the event because this needs to listen to whatever happens in there. So what event are we listening to? We're listening to a onChange event. So let me just hit save for now, and let's open up the console. Right click, inspect, open up the console. Well, this is not what I wanted. So console, I'm going to move you down here, and voila, empty console. So let's say that when I'm changing something in there, I'm going to console log it, and I'm going to console log the e.target.value. So let's see what happens if you start typing something in here. You can see it's going to start outputting the value here. So we don't want to output it in a console, but we want to output it up here. Instead of the name, we want to output whatever we type in here. First, this means that we need to replace the name here with this value, with the name value from here. Now you could either pass it in here. So if we just pass it in as, let me make a copy of this, copy it, comment it out, take this name variable from the state. So the state is currently empty. Because the state is empty, it's going to pass in here an empty state. That means it's going to recognize there's nothing in here and it's going to display title, just as we did in our component. If nothing is passed in here, then display title. If I would pass something in here, let's say Norbert, what am I doing? Norbert, and sorry about the S, and hit save, we will see Norbert because now the state is Norbert and it's passed down here, and this recognizes that is something in there. But what we actually want is to pass in whatever we type in here. And also you can see down here in the signature, it's already Norbert. That's not what we want. We want to change the state. In order to change the state, we need our set name function, which is going to change this state. So let me comment out its console log. We're going to use the set name function, and we're going to pass in here the e.target.value. What is that? Value. There we go. That we are passing in here. So instead of, let me save, and let me also delete Norbert. We're going to have a title, and we're going to pass in here Norbert, and you can already see it is passed in. Now let's pass in here sign, and you can see it's now signed down here. And if we type in Norbert, it's going to change, and on a refresh, it's also going to change back. But I actually want to pass in here your signature, lowercase s. So you just saw how easily we can change this to Norbert by using useState. And we're going to do the same thing for the date. So I'm going to create another state. I'm going to call this date. I'm going to call this set date. And I'm going to leave this empty. And now instead of date, let me go down here. Instead of date, we are going to pass down here date. Date, and it's going to take the date. Well, it's empty. But this is actually, in our case, really not what we want. We want to not have here title, but we could either type in here something. So let's say select date, save it. You will have your select date here. Or you could do something else. You can go down here and say if there is no date, then please display the OB, which is just short for date of birth. And oops, should be a question mark. But if there is a date, then display that date. So instead of having the state passed in here, just give you another example. Then you're going to have the OB, so as a default value. Now let's actually pass in a date and let's actually make this input tag do something. So the value will be, instead of an empty string, the date that's going to be passed in. And we're going to, again, listen to the change, so on change, but this time we need a different handler, and we're going to call this handle change, and not name, but handle date change. Now let's create a function. We're going to go underneath this function, copy, you could just copy and paste this function. Copy, paste it down here, handle date, and again we're going to do the same thing. We're going to select target, e.value.targets. Basically this means we're going to change the date down here. I don't need the console anymore. Select the date, we're going to pass in up here, and assign with Norbert, BM, and that's it. That's our very first project. Okay, so hope you enjoyed the project and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.